Well, hello again, 3C, and welcome to your next lesson. This is lesson 2 of your Unit 1, and we're going to review the Pythagorean Theorem today. Look up at our goal. It says to review the skills necessary for studying trigonometry. Do I hear some deja vu feelings here? That sounds a lot like yesterday's goal, too. Well, we need to make sure you know the skills before we go on to doing trigonometry. So we're going to talk about Pythagorean theorem. Now, Pythagorean theorem is related a lot to some of the trigonometry stuff that we're going to do. And the reason that it's related is because of this first thing that says important. You must have a right angle in your triangle. So we're going to be doing a lot with right angle trigonometry. So that is important. That's why it's in red right across the top of my page. And if you printed out these sheets in red too, they'll be in red on your page as well. It is important. You cannot use Pythagorean theorem unless you have a right angle in your triangle. What's a right angle, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked that. A right angle is one that measures 90 degrees, and this is what it looks like. You won't always have that 90 degrees there. Sometimes it'll just be that box. In fact, most of the time it'll just be that box. But you have to make sure that you have a 90-degree angle, or Pythagorean theorem doesn't work. You can apply it, but it won't give you the right answer unless there's that 90-degree angle there. So look at the other stuff that I have on here, where it says we've got legs. Bet you didn't know a triangle had legs, did ya? There's this leg and this leg. They're called legs, and the two legs make up the 90-degree angle. And the side across from it that is not part of the 90-degree angle, that we could erase it and you would still have the 90-degree angle there, is not a leg, it's a hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is always the longest side of the triangle. It's always the side across from the right angle. In fact, this little box here points the way to the hypotenuse all the time. Okay. So, what is the Pythagorean theorem? Well, the Pythagorean theorem can be written in words like this. When you square the legs, so that's your A and B, if you square them and add them together, you get the same number as when you square the hypotenuse. Well, what do you mean square the legs? If I've got A, how do I square A? Do I just put a box around it? No, you know better than that. Squaring means to multiply something by itself. So if I square an A, and we don't write it with a box around it, this is how we write it. If I square A, that's the same thing as doing A times A. And of course, A is just standing in for a number that we don't know. That number here, this A, could be 5, could be 4. The most common is 3, and 4 for the legs, and 5 for the hypotenuse. That is the most, well, I'm not going to say the most common, but it's the nicest, smallest triangle that has whole number sides. And let's just take a look at that. If I square the legs, okay, I'm going to square this one. If I square 3, that's 3 times 3. Hope you know that's 9. It's not 3 plus 3, it's not 6. It's 3 times 3, which is 9. And down here we've got 4. We'll do 4 times 4 is 16. Not 8. It's not 4 plus 4. It's 4 times 4. So I've got 9 over here and 16 over here. So when I go down here, that's 9 plus 16. And 9 plus 16 is 25. Well, what happens if I square this over here? What happens when I square 5? I get 25, right? That's 5 times 5. Not 5 plus 5. It's not 10. Don't think that it's 10. It's not. It's 5 times 5. It's 25. And whoa, what do you know? That was the same thing we got down here when I squared those two legs and added them together. So if you take the two legs and you square them, which means multiply them by themselves and then add them together, you get the same thing as if you just square the hypotenuse. And this is the formula that we usually see written down: a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay. Now, we're already up to about 5 minutes on this time scale, 4.5 actually. 4:36, 4:37, 4:30. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting hypnotized by the clock there. Finding the hypotenuse when you know the legs. Okay. So here's an example where we're going to find the long side, the side that this is pointing at. We are going to find that side. Okay. Let's put a letter on it. I'm going to put H for hypotenuse. I like that better than C. What this tells us, what the Pythagorean theorem says, is if I take the legs, I've got two legs here, I've got 12 and I've got 8. If I square them and add them together, I'm going to get the same thing as if I take the hypotenuse, which I let be H to stand for hypotenuse, and square it. That's my A squared plus B squared equals C squared, except now that we're using these numbers. So let's actually square them. 12 squared is not 24, it's 144. And 8 squared is 64, 8 times 8. And we don't know what H squared is right now. That's what we're trying to find out. So we're going to leave it as H squared. So 144 and 64, let's see if we can do that in our heads. 140 and 60 would be 200. And then I've got the two 4's there. So it's 208 equals H squared. Well, I can't do the square root of 208 in my head, and that's what we have to do here. We have to undo this squaring, so I have to know what number do I multiply by itself in order to get 208. Well, that's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you if it's not a nice square number. Like if that said 100, I could tell you what two numbers multiplied by what number multiplied by itself gives you 100. Can't do it with 208 so much. So let's pull up my handy dandy calculator, and I'm going to go 208 and take the square root. 14.4. So 14.4, and since this was measured in meters, my answer is in meters, and that is going to equal H. Okay, I got one more example and then I'm going to let you go on this one. See if we can get it in under 10 minutes. Example number 2, finding a leg when you already know one leg and the hypotenuse. So here we have a one-legged triangle. Here's the leg because this points the way to the hypotenuse. Well, remember what our formula said is if I take the two legs, I square them and I add them together, I get the hypotenuse when it's been squared. So this leg, I don't know what it is. I'm going to let it be L for leg. And I'm going to use the script L so that it doesn't look like a 1. So I got to take the two legs. Well, my two legs, I don't know what L is, so I'm just going to call it L. And the other leg is 8. And I'm going to square them and then add them together. And that has to get me the hypotenuse squared. Remember, this is the hypotenuse because this right angle is pointing at it. So let's square the stuff that I can square. I can't square L. I'm going to have to leave it as L squared. Ooh, something's gone haywire here. There we go. L squared plus 8 squared is 64. And 15 squared is 225. Now we have to get L squared by itself first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that L squared by itself by getting rid of this 64. Now if I get rid of a positive 64 by subtracting 64, because 64 minus 64 is 0. But remember, we're using algebra, so whatever I do to one side, I have to do the same thing to the other. So I'm going to subtract 64 on this side as well. So all I'm left with over here, because positive 64 and negative 64 go poof, I'm left with L squared on this side. And 225 minus 64 is 161. Now remember, to get rid of this squared, to figure out what number multiplies by itself to give me 161, I have to take the square root. So L is going to be the square root of 161. Now I can estimate that if I want to, because I know that 12 squared is 144. And 13 squared is 169. So L is going to have to be somewhere between 12 and 13 because 161 is between 144 and 169. And since 161 is closer to 169, I think L is going to be closer to 13. Now you don't have to do all of that, but I like to think about my answer before I actually plug it into the calculator. So I think this is going to be somewhere around 12.8. So that's my prediction. Let's see if I'm right. I'm going to take 161 and take the square root of it. Oh, I was off by a little. That's 12.7. Oh dear. Maybe I'll be better next time. 12.7. Now this was measured in feet, so we got to put this in feet. Now I want you to practice the Pythagorean theorem, and remember, you cannot use the Pythagorean theorem if you don't have a right angle in your triangle. Be very, very careful. And that concludes this video.